Hi, and welcome to Untitled Wargaming. On this week's episode, we're going to be tackling the Trollbloods Battlegroup from Privateer Press.
Kicking things off, there's 4 models in this box set, and I've base coated them all in Death Guard green. The first job I'm going to do is to use some Athonian camo shade to shade in all the skin. This is going to make it a little bit more vibrant and just add some nice shadows to it. Normally the Trollbloods have a teal skin, but I've decided that I want to go with a swamp theme rather than the vibrant teal colours. So we're going with greens and browns instead, and I'll work out some basing later. My first thought for the base is to get some hollow insert bases, which sit recessed rather than flat at the top, and use some muds and resin to sell a wet swamp look. Next step is to come in and re-highlight some of the areas with the Death Guard green again. This is just going to help clear up some of the areas that are a little patchy and help start us on the highlight path. I've mentioned a few times with the highlighting, the most important thing is to just make sure you're leaving some shade in the areas where it's built up in the recesses. Otherwise there was no point in putting it there in the first place. I let that first round of highlights dry, and then I come in with about a 50-50 mix of Death Guard green and Nurgling green. This isn't going to be our final highlight, it's just going to help build up a little bit of the light there. And I've focused as much as I can on the parts where the highlights are going to catch on the top areas of the skin rather than worrying about underneath, on the inside of the hands, under the chin, stuff like that. If you really wanted to, you could also come back in here with another highlight of just pure Nurgling green, or maybe even Nurgling green with a little bit of something brighter mixed into it. I'm going to be using 4 main metal colours over the models. The first one I'm going to start with is Iron Warrior from Games Workshop. This is a darker silver, but it should highlight up quite nicely. And as with all of my paint jobs, you could mix and match things however you decided you wanted to do it. Iron Warrior has just kind of become my go-to silver lately. It being a little bit darker, I don't need to put as much shade onto it as I would with, say, Lead Belcher. The Warlock for this battle group is a Ragnar Sky Splitter. He is a rune master for the trolls. His armour is covered in runes, so to help highlight that, I'm going to put some athematic blue around where the runes are before I worry about painting the inside of the rune brighter. For the inside of the rune, I've just grabbed some Battlegroup blue, and I'm just going to try and fill that in very carefully. If my hands were a little more steady and I had a slightly finer brush, I could also probably try and put a little bit of a brighter white into the runes as well to try and make it look like they're glowing, but I think that's probably just a little bit too much effort. With Ragnar's runes complete, I want to get started on the second of the metal colours. Using some Screaming Bell from Games Workshop, I'm going to start laying down a base colour. This is going to be eventually a copper. And I want to try a little bit of weathering on it once it's finished as well. The main thing with this and any other base coat is to try and get it as smooth as we can so that when we add the different layers, we don't get any weird textures. For the copper colour itself, I'm coming with some Vallejo liquid copper. This is very different to acrylic based paints. This one is alcohol based, and as such you need to use mineral spirits to try and clean it up. For that extra effort and clean up though, you do get a much better copper finish rather than using a standard acrylic, and it gives a really nice smooth finish. Copper's base coated, now we're going to move on to some of the leathers. This is going to be the first of I think 3 leather colours. The trick here is just to make sure you really hold the model outside of frame so that the people viewing the video can't actually tell what you're doing. Moving on from that, we hit with the third metal colour, which is going to be Lead Belcher. Again, could have been any metal colour, I just wanted to go with something a little bit brighter than the Iron Warrior that I already used. And the fourth and final metal colour to get down is some Balthazar Gold. This is going to become a bronze later on when I do some highlighting. I thought it was really important to try and break up all of the different silver pieces that were on the models already, and I don't think an oxidized weathered copper would have done really well for the Warlock's armour. I also put some on the hammer just to help tie that in as well. Wasn't really sure where I was going to go with the hammer at this point. For the leather around the waist, for the pants and for the shirts, I've gone with Xandri Dust because I thought it would be good to try and add something a little bit lighter into the colour scheme, even though I'm going to darken that down later. This will be the second different leather colour that I've used, and the third one is going to be kind of a mid between the two. For me, the hardest part about this step is trying to not hit everything else that I've already done. Because my hands shake a fair bit, I do find that a little hard, and I do come back and touch up some different areas from time to time. For the eyes and the teeth on the trolls, as well as the fingernails, I'm going to come in with some Rakarth flesh. It's just a nice kind of off-white that I can use for details like that. For the Impaler, which is the dude with the spear here, I've also done the entire mouth in Rakarth flesh, and I'm coming back in with some Volupus pink contrast paint just to add some colour into it. You'll notice as well the eyes are a little bit blank here. I did try for about 3 hours to try and get some pupils done on the models, and then I gave up and just coloured back in with Rakarth flesh. And then the third of the leather colours is Mournfang Brown. So this is kind of just a nice point between the really dark Dryad bark that I've used earlier and the Xandri Dust that I used. When you've got a lot of leather or metal parts on a model like this, it really helps us try and find some different colours to break that up. I settled with a stone look for the hammer and for the beard that Ragnar has. According to the artwork, it does look kind of stone or grey. So I've come in here with a Mechanicus standard grey to build up the base of that. I'm just going to do some quick highlighting on the bronze with some Psychorax bronze. Most of them I'm just going to come over from the top half of the bronze areas, just to try and give them a quick highlight. This will just make it look a lot more bronze rather than the darker Balthazar Gold. And by leaving the Balthazar Gold in the shadow areas, it will kind of look more like a natural shadow rather than a different paint colour. To muddy up the clothes and the different leather parts, I'm going to come in with some Agrax Earthshade. Normally I'd be very careful to try and get this as smooth as I could and then highlight up, but being that these guys are meant to be from a swamp, I wanted to leave it more dirty and pooled. Continue on with the weathering steps. On some of the armour plates, where it gets further away from the highlights, I'm going to come in with some of the Basilicanum Grey contrast paint, just to make it a little bit darker. That'll help some of the highlights stand out even more. And just give us a subtle bit of hint that that armour might have been sitting around for a while without going full rusty. For the leg panels, I did just kind of do it all over. Just because the legs themselves, there's a lot of shadow in there and not as much space for the highlights, but the contrast will still allow some of the highlights to come through. The last step for these models is to use some Nailac Oxide onto the copper. I did consider using an oil wash here, but laziness won out, and I just used that instead of mixing up some of the oil paints that I've got sitting around somewhere in the house. To clean it up, I've just used a cotton bud. It was only wet with a little bit of water here, because I wanted to try and leave as much sitting in the recesses as I could. I did wipe off too much, as you can see, and then I've come back in with another layer to help build it up a bit more. With any weathering effect like this, you can come back as many times as you need to build up the final colour that you want. So don't be afraid to put a heap on there, wipe it off, realise you've done too much, and then try again. It won't matter. The finished product will still look good. After I finished filming this video, I did come back into some of the metal areas and add some Fuegan Orange wash from GW, just to give it a little bit of a rusty effect, because I decided the dark steel just wasn't quite enough. I'm really looking forward to getting these guys onto the table soon and based, so that I can use them in some videos later this year.
And there we have it, completed Trollbloods. I'll get the bases done in the coming months and I'll do another video on that as well, the same as the road basing video that I've done. Do have another video coming up in the next week or so, which is the video I'd had planned for March. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe. Have a good one.